What can you tell me about alpha-gal syndrome?
Alpha-gal syndrome is a rare allergic condition caused by a bite from certain ticks, most notably the Lone Star tick. After being bitten, some people develop an allergy to a carbohydrate called alpha-gal, which is found in red meat, like beef, pork, and lamb. What's unusual is that the allergic reaction is often delayed, sometimes a few hours after eating. Symptoms range from hives and digestive issues to severe anaphylaxis. It's been increasing, particularly in outdoor communities, and it's still an active area of research.
What can you tell me about Sharon Forsyth?
Sharon Forsyth is a prominent advocate in the alpha-gal community, especially through the alpha-gal project. She's been really active in spreading awareness, helping people recognize the condition, and making sure folks in outdoor and hunting communities know about the risks.
Interesting. Do you think she'd be willing to sit down with me for a podcast-style interview so we can raise awareness to the outdoor communities?
I think it's definitely possible. Sharon seems really committed to awareness work, especially in outdoor settings. So I think if you just approach her with a thoughtful message explaining what your podcast aims to do and how her voice could help, there's a good chance she'd be open to it. So yeah, I'd say go for it.
I guess it's worth a shot.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to introduce our guest for this episode. When I reached out to the Insect Shield team looking for someone truly knowledgeable about alpha-gal, they pointed me straight to tonight's expert. Please help me welcome Sharon Forsyth. Sharon is the Executive Director of the alpha-gal Alliance and the alpha-gal Alliance Action Fund. She's also the creator of the alpha-gal information website, widely regarded as the most comprehensive and trusted resource on alpha-gal syndrome available. Sharon has become a leading voice in patient advocacy, education, and awareness around this tick-related meat allergy. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you taking this time. To get started, could you tell us a little bit about your own involvement with alpha-gal research advocacy and the alpha-gal community? How did you get involved and what drives you to work in this space?
Nicholas, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited about it. My background had nothing to do with allergies, and I didn't have any allergies. I got involved when I got alpha-gal syndrome. I was one of those rare people who actually had heard about alpha-gal syndrome before I got it. I actually heard about it just a few weeks before I had my first reaction. And I was kind of in disbelief. I thought, how could a tick cause you to have an allergy? And then a few weeks later, I got a few tick bites during those weeks. And then I ate a hamburger, and 4 hours later, I had an anaphylactic reaction. And I just couldn't believe it because I assumed if this thing was even real, that it was really rare. So I stopped eating red meat, which is, I thought, all I needed to do, but I still kept reacting. So I had to give up dairy and gelatin and byproducts and avoid cross contact. And when I did all that, my husband, who had severe GI issues, such bad reflux that his stomach almost separated from his esophagus, and crippling arthritis, all his symptoms went away. We never thought in a million years he had alpha-gal syndrome, but he went and got tested, and he has it too. So at that point, I got really interested. I tried to start learning about alpha-gal, but there wasn't really any information out there on the internet. So I started reading the papers, and I realized not everybody was going to be able to do this. So I created the website, and I started raising awareness about it, just really because I thought it needed to be done, and there was no one else.
It's crazy to know that both you and your husband have experienced it. Do you guys do a lot of outdoorsy type things, or how do you think you first came in contact?
Well, that's the crazy thing. That was sort of my first clue that maybe this thing is not super rare, is that we both have it. I was bit in DC and Virginia, and my husband, his tick bites were in Latin America because he's a biologist and he works in the Andes Amazon region. So completely different ticks in different parts of the world.
Can you recall specifically the time you picked that tick off of you that might have been a carrier?
I actually got about 5 tick bites. The way I heard about alpha-gal was the guy that I was hanging out with looking for butterflies said to me, you're not taking the necessary precautions and you're going to get a tick bite disease or that crazy meat allergy. So I got a bunch of ticks, and yes, I do remember getting them in different places at different times.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this. From what I understand, most tick-borne illnesses, the tick has to be attached for 24 hours. But in this case with alpha-gal, the Lone Star tick, they say it just needs to latch onto you, and that's all it needs to do. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. One of the leading experts, Scott Cummins, whom I work with a lot, says if it was attached long enough to make you itch, it was attached long enough. That itch is the sign that there's this immunological process going on that could lead to you becoming allergic. We hear stories in the alpha-gal community. Sometimes Lone Star ticks won't even attach. Before they attach, they'll walk along and bite you. We know of stories of people who were bitten and tick didn't even attach and they got alpha-gal.
That's pretty crazy. So, how is this diagnosed?
The primary way you diagnose it is with a blood test called the alpha-gal IgE blood test. And if you go to your doctor and ask for this, they can order it. But you should never get the test unless you have symptoms, because a lot of people who test positive don't actually have the allergy. So sometimes we see doctors who order the test just because someone got a tick bite, and you should never do that. There's another important thing to know. With most allergies, you can use skin prick tests to confirm that you have it, but for alpha-gal, those aren't reliable. So you've got a combination of symptoms plus the skin prick test. There's another dimension to diagnosing alpha-gal, and that's that you have to recognize the symptoms first. And it's really different than a peanut allergy, where you eat a peanut and then you immediately react. It's not too hard to figure out you have a peanut allergy. But with alpha-gal, it's a lot more complicated. First of all, there's this delay. You eat a hamburger and then maybe 6, 7, even 8 hours later, you react. And you don't necessarily think about the hamburger when it's in the middle of the night. A lot of the time, our reactions are in the middle of the night. So we always say, if you have a history of tick bites and you live in a high prevalence area and you're waking up in the middle of the night with hives or other allergic symptoms or really bad GI symptoms, severe abdominal pain or terrible diarrhea or vomiting, you might want to get tested. Particularly if you think back and say, oh yeah, I did eat a steak that night. Here's another tricky bit of diagnosing alpha-gal. The reactions don't necessarily happen every time. So some people could eat a hamburger every day for a month and not react, and then eat a hamburger and have a life-threatening reaction that could put them in the hospital. And then they could eat another hamburger for another month. It only happens sometimes. Some people only react when they drink alcohol or when they exercise. This is one reason why so many people don't get diagnosed. They think, oh, well, I did react after I ate that hamburger, but then I ate a hamburger and I was fine, so it can't be the hamburger.
And just thinking of that, I heard a statistic, I don't know if this is true. They say 2 out of 3 people with alpha-gal are misdiagnosed. If that's true, what's causing that gap? Is it because a lot of these doctors just don't fully understand, or is it something entirely different?
I think it's a couple of things. First of all, we know there was a study just to see how much doctors actually knew about alpha-gal, and more than 40% of them had never even heard of it. And another 35% didn't know how to diagnose it. Yeah, if your doctor's never heard of it, you're not going to get diagnosed. It's very unusual for an allergy to present with GI symptoms without any other classic allergic symptoms like hives or swelling. Often people have their gallbladder out. They get a whole bunch of GI tests, endoscopies, colonoscopies, you name it. They get treated for other GI disorders. So that's another problem. And then some people just have very atypical symptoms. I know a few people, they had a heart attack as their first symptom. So their blood pressure dropped. That caused them to have a heart attack. Those are the main reasons. And then just the fact that the patient doesn't suspect it because they didn't put 2 and 2 together.
For all the outdoorsmen out there that do go out and they do pick ticks off of them, is there very specific symptoms should think about, or is it just a large scope depending on the person? What's that look like?
I think the first thing you want to take note of is what species of tick bit you. Blackleg ticks, the ones that cause Lyme, and western blackleg ticks, they can cause alpha-gal, but they don't cause it as frequently as Lone Star ticks. If a Lone Star tick bit you, the first thing you want to notice is, did you get an itchy local reaction? If you didn't get any kind of a itchy local reaction, you're probably not going to develop alpha-gal. If you did get an itchy spot where the tick attached, then it doesn't mean you'll get alpha-gal, but you're more likely to get alpha-gal. So if that happens, don't rush off and get a test, because then you might test positive and never have any reactions, and then you have changed your entire life for no reason whatsoever. Wait a few weeks. Start to notice if you have any weird reactions, like do you start to develop weird GI symptoms you didn't have before? Do you start getting rashes? Do your eyes swelled up for no reason? This won't happen typically for weeks to months, maybe up to a year after the tick bit you. Now, if you've had a lot of tick bites, it might happen a little bit faster. You're a hunter, yeah. You may have already been what we call sensitized. And then it might be weeks like it was for me, like a couple of weeks.
It's interesting you say that, because About 6 weeks ago, right here on my shoulder, I picked a Lone Star tick off and it still itches. Like it's still slightly raised, and I have no symptoms right now. But I hope, now that you say that, I'll definitely keep an eye on it.
You know who to call. We
Yeah,
even have this
exactly.
weird thing where when we react, for a lot of us, and this happens to me, one of the tick bites that we got will flare like years later. I mean, it's been since 2019, and sometimes when I get a reaction like this one tick bite that I had will still get all red and itchy.
Bringing up the hunter portion of it, that's where I first was introduced to the idea of alpha gal. I was at an archery tournament and I overheard the group next to us talking about how there's a Lone Star tick. It's the one with the white dot on its back and it bites people and they get allergic to meat. And I was like, there ain't no way. This was like 4 or 5 years. This sounds like a fairy tale thing. But if it's real, that's absolutely terrifying. And at that time, before I even overheard that conversation, I saw nothing online about alpha gal. I've never heard of it before. So at that point in time, if I would have come in contact, I would have no idea that those symptoms, probably like most people, are alpha gal related. And that's the whole reason for consulting with you and for having these conversations. I'm hoping to raise awareness to my fellow outdoor archery hunting community so that we can get this information out there so people can be better prepared and maybe less misdiagnosed. I think that this is an important conversation.
That is so great. And we know from studies that have been done that hunters are at more risk. So if the general population has a certain rate of alpha-gal syndrome, the hunting community is going to have 3 times the rate because they get more tick bites. But you said that it's the tick with the white spot, and it's really important to remember that the female's got a spot, but the male doesn't.
Interesting.
And the little nymphs don't. So if you can, take a picture and send it to the tick spotters and they'll ID it for you. Or stick it in the freezer and then when you have a chance, photograph it and send it to tick spotters. There's another thing that people don't realize, and that's in the South. People will call these little tiny larval ticks that swarm all over you chiggers, but they're not actually chiggers. There is such a thing as chiggers, but a lot of times what people call in areas where there's Lone Star ticks, chiggers are actually larval Lone Star ticks. They're so tiny that you can barely see them. The first time I was hit by what we call a tick bomb, which is a cluster of these ticks, hundreds to thousands, I thought it was red earth. I was thinking, that's crazy because the dirt in this area is not red. And I went to brush it away and then it started to disperse. A lot of the time when people get alpha gal, it's from those because you just get so many bites.
You're right on it being important for the hunters to know this because I know a lot of us, especially right now, this time of year, we're preparing for the upcoming archery season. So we're walking through the thick stuff. We're hanging tree stands. We're putting out deer cameras. We're putting up feeders. And we're going into areas that's not like a trail. It's kind of off the beaten path. We're walking through this thick stuff. And even just going to public lands and scouting to see what deer are there. Last year I did what you're talking about and I walked through a nest and I looked down and it looked like there was thousands of ticks on me and it took forever to pick all of them off. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Can't pick them off. What I recommend, what I do now, I carry a lint roller and I just whip it out of my backpack and you can just roll them up in no time.
Really? That's an
But yeah,
interesting tip. I'll
it's
have to remember
amazing.
that one.
I've not gotten bit by a larval Lone Star tick since I started carrying a lint roller.
Is there a statistic for how many ticks carry this alpha gal disease?
You know, we think that all Lone Star ticks can make alpha gal, but we don't really know for sure. I mean, nobody's really studied Lone Star ticks. All the effort has gone into studying blackleg ticks because Lyme disease is such a serious disease and people didn't know that alpha gal existed. And then for years, they just thought it was like a few thousand cases. So now there's a shift towards thinking we need to study Lone Star ticks more. So we think they all can. What determines whether you develop alpha gal or not? We still don't really know, but we know a couple of things. If you get more tick bites, you're going to be more likely to get alpha gal. The more bites you get, the more likely it is. And that's why these little larval ticks that people call chiggers often cause it. We know that if you have type B blood, you're a tiny bit less likely to get alpha gal, but doesn't mean that you won't get it. Then, of course, getting bit by ticks at all. But other than that, we don't really know why one person gets a huge number of tick bites. Maybe they've had thousands of tick bites over their entire life and they don't get alpha gal and the next person does. It's just completely unknown.
That's very intriguing about blood type having something to do with it and influencing that outcome. That's pretty wild. I'm loving this conversation because I'm learning so much already, but I expected to, learning from you, of course. How common is alpha-gal and how much more common is it becoming? Do we have a statistic that says how many people have it or may have it?
No, we do not. Certain diseases are what they call nationally notifiable diseases that if a doctor or a laboratory gets a positive case, they have to report it, like Lyme disease. But alpha-gal syndrome's not notifiable, so that we don't really have data on how many cases there are. But we do have some data that can give us a little glimpse into it. There was a study of military recruits where they looked at their blood and saw how many of them had the allergic antibody. What we know is that when I was diagnosed, just in 2019, they thought there were 5,000 cases. Then in 2020, they adjusted the estimate up to 34,000. And then in 2023, they adjusted it to 450,000. And back then, they thought there was 15,000 new cases a year. But now we know that those numbers are way off, but we just don't know what the real number is. Probably a couple million is my guess.
That would make sense, and it's scary to know. It's almost like a multiplier. Every year, the percentage raises and raises. Is that because the Lone Star tick is thriving and expanding into new areas?
I think the number one reason is just because alpha-gal is so poorly known, and it's just so tricky for people to know whether they have it. Increased diagnosis is the number one thing.
It makes you wonder how many people have been diagnosed with what they think is a specific disease and they're living a life in struggle when in reality alpha-gal is what they have.
Well, that was the case with my husband. You know, if his stomach had separated from his esophagus, they can't repair that. You just die. He was really sick, and also he's a biologist. He has to be able to walk, and the arthritis made it really hard. We know people who died. There was a gentleman in Kentucky, and I have talked to his wife, and he was just really sick in the middle of the night. He'd have terrible GI symptoms and lose consciousness. They tested it. They thought it was his heart. Then they thought it was neurological. They finally got around to testing him for alpha-gal. And then before he got the test results back, he ate pork and died from the reaction. Then his test results came back, and they were really high.
Wow, that's sad. That's sad to
Yeah,
hear that.
super sad.
You said pork, and I know the big thing is people are saying red meat is what you want to avoid. And I talked to Grayson from Oklahoma. I'm going to be doing an interview with him as well. It sounded like he was allergic to even certain soaps that had animal products in it. If you could talk about, other than red meat, what are some things people need to be aware of? And for even your personal story, what kinds of things did you find you were having issues with?
I hope this will motivate some of your listeners to try not to get this disease and to take the necessary tick bite precautions, because if it was just red meat, it wouldn't be that big deal. It still makes some people really sad, but in my case, I didn't really even eat that much red meat. I was like, well, I can't eat red meat. Like, it's kind of a bummer. You can react to dairy, which means anything with milk, butter in it, and all kinds of other dairy-derived ingredients. Gelatin, another super common thing. All kinds of byproducts, things you wouldn't think of, like vitamin D3 that's in your Cheerios. But then there's also personal care products have mammal-derived ingredients in them. I couldn't figure out why my mouth was swelling, and it turned out to be my toothpaste. The biggest deal and the most serious thing is medicines. Medicines can have alpha-gal in them. Things like antivenom. Now, you're a hunter. You don't want to be allergic to antivenom. If you've got alpha-gal and you get bitten by a rattlesnake or something, you still might need that antivenom. They'll have to give it to you, and they'll just have to medicate you for the reaction. It's a bad thing. All kinds of things they use when they operate on you. So it really can very much complicate your medical care.
Wow, that's crazy. I was at an archery event. I heard this gentleman talking about alpha-gal. It feels like the conversation's coming up so much lately. He was telling us that when he first got it and ate red meat, he went into shock and his throat swelled up, and he has to carry an EpiPen in his truck and an EpiPen in his bino harness when he's out and about. It's just crazy to think the prime reason a lot of us hunt is just to go out and connect with nature, and most of us consume venison meat, and I'll be going on a hog hunt in Oklahoma next week, and it's crazy to think that we're going there to experience our passions, and we can get bit by this little tick and it can completely ruin one of the things that we're most passionate about, and that's hunting and being out and enjoying the outdoors. So it's kind of crazy.
It's like some sick, twisted joke. And the same is true for farmers. There are a lot of people who have cattle ranchers. They get bit. And then not only can they not eat the beef, they can react to their cows, especially when the cows are calving and the amniotic fluid can cause a reaction. For deer hunters, one thing they have to know is if they have alpha-gal syndrome, you can have a life-threatening reaction to blood. So I know of a guy who was a hunter. He was out hunting with his kid. He had alpha-gal syndrome and he got a blood exposure and died from the reaction. So really important for hunters to know that. If you got alpha-gal, please take precautions. If you're preparing a carcass, don't do it on your own. First of all, wear gloves. Depending on how sensitive you are, have somebody else do it.
Interesting. And that just made me think of something. If I needed some blood and I got a blood donation from someone and they were alpha-gal positive, then I risk getting alpha-gal from that blood. Would that be true or no?
You can't get alpha-gal from somebody else, but there is a crazy transfusion thing where if you have type O blood and you have alpha-gal and you get blood, they wouldn't give you the red blood cells from somebody who had a different blood type for you. There's the plasma and the platelets. Sometimes they will give platelets and plasma from someone with type B blood to someone with type O blood. And if you've got alpha-gal syndrome, that can cause a very severe reaction. They're just learning about this. They're just researching this. One guy also died from a reaction that seemed to be related to that.
Do we know how many people have died from alpha-gal? I know with misdiagnosis and people not knowing, it might be hard to track that down. Is it a specific percentage of people that we know have it, like maybe less than 5% or between 5 and 10 that risk death? I guess all of them risk death, but what do those numbers look like?
It's way, way less than 5%. With allergies in general, anaphylaxis can be very serious and you can die. It's important not to exaggerate the risk of death, particularly keep your EpiPens with you. And if you're going to be like really far away, you might need more than 2 EpiPens to make it out of the woods. So get enough EpiPens. Only a small number of people have died. Most people have died from a cancer drug called cetuximab. So if you get colon cancer, you might need this drug. And if you've got alpha-gal, or even the allergic antibody to alpha-gal, and you've never had an allergic symptom, then you could have a reaction and die. So that's killed the most people. And then there have other been people mostly who were undiagnosed. One person died during cardiac surgery from a medical exposure. There was a kid in Australia who was undiagnosed. He ate sausages. We don't know how many deaths. I saw 2 obituaries just this year of people from Missouri who died. We don't have all the details. So people do die, but the vast majority of us do not.
Yeah, great info there. It's kind of a, I want to say funny, but maybe not funny thing where as a hunter, people ask some of the things I might be afraid about hunting. I can walk miles and not have cell signals. I could be injured and not really have a way out, and I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about walking in the dark. I'm not worried about coming across coyotes and bobcats and maybe even mountain lions. That doesn't scare me. Falling out of a tree stand doesn't scare me. When it comes to hunting, I haven't had anything to be scared about. And now with this alpha-gal syndrome, I am absolutely terrified of this tick that can make me allergic to red meat and completely ruin my passion for archery. So it is, in a way, a pretty scary deal for us hunters.
You should take every precaution you can not to get alpha-gal. Then if you were to get it, you'd be really sad and have to go through an adjustment period. But I know so many hunters, they developed alpha-gal. They were really sad. Then they just made the adjustment and they just love hunting as much as they ever did, and there's no way they're going to give it up.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is just the severity levels for different people. It's my understanding that some people may have such minor symptoms from it where they just eat a burger and maybe they itch a little bit, but some people can risk death under certain circumstances. Do you know what can cause the extreme differences?
Nobody really knows. Unfortunately, the thing to be cautious about is that it could change, right? So if you have alpha-gal syndrome and then you get more tick bites, your reactions could get worse. Half the time when you've had a new tick bite, we know from studies of Lyme, you don't even know that you got bitten by a tick. So maybe you're that person who just gets some itches. If you have alpha-gal, you should not be eating red meat, even if you've had a mild reaction, because past reactions are not predictive of what future reactions might be. Now, it's another story when it comes to things other than red meat. There's quite a few people who they can't eat red meat, and there's certain medications that might be dangerous for them, or mostly used in surgery or cancer treatments, but they can eat dairy just fine. They don't have to worry about gelatin. They take gel caps. They take medications in gelatin capsules, and they're fine. So if you're lucky, it's still not that lucky, but
I really don't want to take my chances there, but I hope if it's something I do develop, I can be on the minor side of that. What are some of the myths or just very common misconceptions that you hear about alpha-gal?
I think that one of the most common misconceptions is that it's going to present with classic allergic symptoms like hives. People don't know that you can just have bad GI symptoms that are like food poisoning. Unfortunately, that can really result in people like getting their gallbladder out or being really, really sick for decades and getting all kinds of unnecessary treatments and procedures. I think another one is that there's a cure. Whenever there's a disease that's not curable, there's going to be a lot of people who claim they can cure it, and that is true for alpha-gal too. People spend a lot of money on these host of different kinds of cures, and that can be dangerous if you think you can go back to eating red meat. If you just want to experiment with it and see if the inadvertent exposures don't cause reactions, that's one thing. But if you go back to eating red meat, that's really dangerous. And we know someone who died under those circumstances.
I'm glad we were able to touch on that, because one of my next questions was going to be, does it ever go away? And what are the cures? I've heard that acupuncture, maybe specifically an ear acupuncture, and this might be just some of the things people are trying out to see if it works. And I also heard from Grayson in Oklahoma that acupuncture didn't work for him, but he used something called teasel root, and that worked for him really well. So maybe if you could talk a little bit more about the options out there.
Well, there's no evidence that any of that stuff works, no credible evidence. Some people feel they're cured from one thing or another. The truth is that a lot of time alpha-gal just resolves on its own. We don't call it cured because a new tick bite can bring it back. We call it remission. Thinking that you're cured can be a little risky. You want to give it some time because you don't know if it's just that inconsistency of reactions. This one guy who got one of these cures, he ate hamburgers for like 2 months. Then he ate a beef taco, had a reaction, and died. So you want to make sure that that's not what's going on. Be super cautious. Some alternative thing might turn out to work, but right now there's no evidence that it does. There's just a lot of hopeful people out there that want to believe that it does. And if you get this thing, then your symptoms go away. How do you know whether it was the thing or whether your symptoms just went away, which is common?
I'm glad there's hope out there. I've actually heard a couple people mention it seems like over time their body just kind of seems to adjust more. They kind of start building up a kind of an immunity to it. I don't know if that's true, but that kind of gives us hope a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is a university that really wants to develop something called oral immunotherapy, which is exactly that, a little bit of exposure, then a little bit more, and then a little bit more until you develop tolerance. But it doesn't really work unless you do it in a very systematic, controlled way. And also, if you're doing that on your own, it could be very dangerous. So there isn't a protocol for that yet, but there's a university that wants to do this. And then there's some other truly hopeful things. There's a medication that seems to be able to keep you from getting alpha-gal. So if you're a hunter like you might be able to have a dose of this. And then if you get bitten by a tick bite, you might be able to take it and then not develop alpha-gal. But of course, before they're going to make that available, they have to do clinical trials, make sure it really works. And then if you have alpha-gal, this drug might be able to stop you from getting worse. There's a couple of companies that are trying to develop, I don't know if you want to call them cures or treatments, because I don't think we really know that they're going to make it go away for everyone or completely. But there are a couple of companies that are investing really heavily in technologies that might help.
It does give me hope. That's one of the things I was going to ask you. I know you're doing a lot to advocate and to raise awareness. I was going to ask if there's any other ongoing research into treatments or cures, and it sounds like there is. So it sounds like there's people fighting the good fight for this and raising some awareness and trying to find cures and stuff.
There absolutely are. We have the most amazing researchers. We have the administration is interested and Congress is interested. When push comes to shove, it all comes down to the almighty dollar and nobody wants to part with this. We keep fighting. That's what we fight for more than anything. We want funding for the research so we can have the cures, we can have the preventatives, and then we can all go out and do our target archery. Although after you named all those things that you aren't scared of, I'm totally scared of this thing, so I don't know. I do not want to be lost.
Well, I'm terrified of that tick now, I can tell you that.
You named a whole lot of things I hadn't thought to be scared of in the woods that now I'm scared of.
Oh, that's so funny. We used to, speaking of being scared, it made me think of a funny story. My buddy and I, we used to scare each other with this. We had this little creepy doll, and he'd put it in my truck, and I'd open it and be like, what the heck? And then I remember one time I hiked out to the secluded stand. It took a couple miles to get in there, and it's in the dark, and I'm just kind of tired, and I have my headlamp, and you dim it so you can kind of barely see, so you don't spook game and stuff. And I got my little lamp, and it's dark, and I'm climbing up after hiking, and I look, and he had hunted in that area and went over and stuck that creepy little doll in my tree stand. So it was like the first thing I saw with the light right in front of my face. Oh, I'm getting Steve back for that one.
Yeah, you're going to have to think long and hard about how you're going to get back at him.
So funny.
I'm sure it will be a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun. So, what are the best evidence-based ways to prevent tick bites in the first place? Maybe some repellents in clothing and stuff like that.
Unambiguously, the number one best way to help protect yourself against ticks is permethrin. You can't put it on your skin, and when it's wet, you can't have it around your cat. So that's important to understand. It's really dangerous for cats when it's wet. You can spray your shoes, spray your gear, treat your clothes. I like to send my clothes to Insect Shield, and I don't have any kind of relationship with them whatsoever. No financial relationship. Because they treat it with this special commercial process that makes it last through 70 washes, just based on my own experience, I think it works a little bit better than when you spray it at home. You can buy the permethrin spray and spray your own clothing, and it will last like 6 washes. It's kind of a pain in my opinion. But you can get these bags from Insect Shield. You stuff your clothes in, you ship them off, they treat them, they send them back. So that is the number one. Number two, I'm a great believer in double-sided carpet tape. If you're out in the woods, if you're wearing high boots, which I'm guessing a lot of hunters are, you can wrap the tops in double-sided carpet tape. I started doing this. I've not had a tick manage to get onto me since then, because Lone Star ticks, they don't just sit out on the end of a piece of grass and wait for you. They hunt you. So they come from across the ground, they crawl up, and they get stuck in the tape.
Dang.
Now, if I'm going to be out somewhere that I know is super ticky, and I know there's a bunch of pawpaws in the understory or something, and I know stuff's going to be hitting me on the thighs, I will even wrap it around my thighs. But very important information, don't wrap it the same height or your legs will stick together. Which will be very embarrassing. And then I carry a lint roller, particularly late summer, early fall, because that's when you get these tick bombs. Lone Star ticks do something special that other ticks don't do. Actually, Asian longhorn ticks do it, but most ticks don't do it. They're tiny little babies. They're larvae that you can barely see. They gather in these clusters that you call a tick bomb at the end of a piece of grass. And then if you brush against that, that's what happened to you. You got a tick bomb. Hundreds to thousands. And they're really hard to get off. If they bite you, you've got a lot of bites. And the more bites you get, the more likely it is you're going to get alpha-gal. So I carry a lint roller. And I've twice been hit by a tick bomb since I had my lint roller. And I'll tell you, it's amazing. You just just roll them right up. And they cannot get off the lint roller.
That's a pro tip for people listening in the archery that do 3D archery events that are always walking through those tick nests. Keep one of those lint rollers in your backpack.
It's amazing. I didn't get a single bite from those last 2 tick bombs.
Is there anything you can apply directly to your skin, or should you avoid that altogether?
So that's one of those $1,000,000 questions. Well, I mean, there's only like 2 Lone Star tick experts really in the country. They have the impression that DEET is not that effective, and it's probably partly because Lone Stars are just so darn fast. Permethrin's the only thing that kills ticks, and other repellents just repel them, but these Lone Star ticks, they run like a spider. They run right over the repellent and then go and attach to your skin. It couldn't hurt, but we don't think it's that effective. Not as effective as it is with black leg ticks. So DEET, picaridin are 2 of the more popular things. Some people will swear by some essential oil or whatever. There isn't really data on that, but there's no harm in playing around with it as long as it's not super toxic.
I also heard DEET isn't the best for ticks. I think that's good for mosquitoes, which we also face that a lot on the archery course and hunting.
I think DEET's pretty effective against blackleg ticks, or somewhat effective, but I have heard people say that Lone Star ticks drink DEET for breakfast. I probably wouldn't go that far. Even I was bitten by ticks while wearing permethrin treated clothing. Because they run so fast, they can just make it over them. But it's still your best bet. What I don't like about DEET is the way it eats away at your gear. Lemon, eucalyptus, I don't know. I have no idea if those work, to tell you the truth.
Like the more natural ones, eucalyptus and peppermint oil and stuff like that. Bark
I think
oil.
lemon eucalyptus seems to work against some biting flies in my experience, but I don't know about ticks.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Insect Shield because that's how I found your contact. In the outdoor hunting communities, people know about Sitka gear, and that's the camo that I wear. They partnered with Insect Shield. Someone in upper management, Sitka, I think they got a tick bite. Maybe it was alpha-gal, maybe it was some other tick-borne illness. But they wanted to introduce a lightweight gear for the earlier seasons that had that insect shield on it, and it's treated like you're talking about Dryden. It even has like a thin netting thing on it where if a bug gets in there, it goes between the 2 layers. Interesting stuff, but I've got a bunch of that early season insect shield Sitka gear, and I think that stuff is awesome. So I'll definitely be getting more of that.
Sitka?
Yeah, Sitka. Yep.
Oh, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, get on their website and in the search bar type insect, and you'll see their insect shield specific camo patterns and stuff. So they have pants and a lightweight shirt. It's like mosquitoes aren't supposed to be able to pick you through it, and it has the repellent and stuff in it. So for this time of year when I'm going out and going through the thick stuff and I know I'm going to be sweaty, I like that lightweight stuff with the insect shield in it, because then I feel a lot safer. So
You know what? You're reminding me because I think because these Lone Star ticks just are so fast and they're a little bit more resistant to some of these things. I love the idea of trapping them. And then when you trap them, then they're in contact with the permethrin long enough to kill them. There's another product I really love, which I forgot about. I don't really know how you use this if you're wearing tall boots, but there are these tick gaiters, like Limeys tick gaiters that are permethrin treated. And they have these little nooks and crannies that the ticks crawl into, and then when they crawl in there, then the permethrin really kills them.
I'll have to check those out.
They're so cool. I don't know why they don't have like Limeys things that you could wrap around your thighs, because if you're bushwhacking, there can be stuff that's a little bit higher up, you know?
I thought of this the other day when I was weed eating. It was just overall complacency, and this is good for hunters because when I'm going on a hunting trip or I'm going to a 3D archery event, I'm wearing the insect shield clothing. I'm spraying down with the bug spray. I'm checking my pants. I'm picking ticks off. When I get home, I'm showering. I'm checking. It's like I'm doing my due diligence, and I'm super careful. But then when I'm in the safety of my own home, when I'm out mowing and weed eating, I'm not wearing the tick shield stuff. I'm not spraying down really, and I'm weed eating. It almost seems like that complacency is what could get a lot of people the tick-borne illnesses, or maybe even pets, right? Like you do all these things when you know you're going to be going out into the woods or into the brush to prevent a tick bite, but you let your dog outside and he runs around and he brings ticks in. You don't realize that you're not really safe in the comfort of your own home or your own yard.
That is so, so true. Pet ownership is a risk factor for developing alpha-gal. I know so many people, they sleep with their dog, and that's really risky. There are all kinds of things if you go to the vet that you can get for your dog to help kill them. Having a dog that you let outdoors, and then particularly if you're not careful about the ticks, I think that's a huge risk factor. People a lot of the time have dogs that get ticks, even when they've got alpha-gal and they're really trying to avoid them. They keep getting them from their dogs. Or sometimes they said, oh, I was bitten in my car. The tick must have flown in the window. And I'm like, do you have a dog? Like, yeah, probably crawled off your dog. Probably didn't fly in the window since.
Yeah, the chances of that happening.
Yeah.
Let's not introduce a whole other reason why people need to be worried.
Talk about myths, that's one of them. People think ticks can fly and
That's crazy.
fall out of trees, which the tick experts say is not a thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Is there any other topics or things that we could discuss for the listeners that you can think of?
I just think the main points are take those precautions. You do not want to get this thing. I thought it was no big deal until I realized really what the implications were. It's totally worth it. I was one of these people who just thought, oh, I'm not worried about tick-borne disease. I'm so relaxed. I'm not neurotic or whatever. Take those precautions, number one. And permethrin is your friend. Number two, and double-sided carpet tape, probably my other number 1, 2 recommendation. Then if you're getting a lot of tick bites and you think you have IBS, you think you have gallbladder problems, you think you have Crohn's disease, you develop joint problems, particularly if it's after a tick bite, you might want to consider getting tested. And then if it comes back positive, cut out red meat, see what happens. See if you feel better.
Super helpful. Sharon, before we wrap up, for our listeners who want to know more or stay connected with you and your work, where can they follow you in the alpha-gal Alliance?
The way I really communicate is through the alpha-gal Information Project. It's a project of the alpha-gal Alliance. They can check out the alpha-gal Alliance website. If they want to get involved in advocacy, they have alpha-gal and they want to try to help us pass a bill that would require that alpha-gal be disclosed on the labels of foods. They can go to the alpha-gal Alliance website and become a member. But if they just want to learn about alpha-gal, go to alpha-gal Information. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, there's an alpha-gal Information page. We're on Twitter too, but I'm not really on Twitter much. There are also always more and more other websites that have good information. It used to just be alpha-gal Information, but now there's Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic. CDC has got some good information. So there's all kinds of, CDC actually has a hunter brochure about alpha-gal.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your incredible expertise with our listeners. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. This has been so informative and helpful for anyone dealing with alpha-gal or even wanting to learn more about it. Your work through the alpha-gal Alliance and the resources you've created are truly making a difference, spreading awareness and supporting people who are navigating this condition. So thank you again, Sharon. We're so grateful to be able to pick your brain and spread awareness.
Thank you so much. It's really been a lot of fun being on your show.